The sun in Napa Valley that day felt like a blessing, like a tangible thing you could reach out and touch. It spilled over the rolling green hills, bathed the vineyard in a warm golden light, and made the delicate white roses woven into my chignon seem to glow from within. This was it, the idyllic, picture-perfect wedding every girl supposedly dreams of. And standing there, looking into Mark's eyes as we said our vows, I truly believed I was living in a fairy tale. His lopsided grin, the one that had charmed me from the moment we met, was broader than I'd ever seen it. His eyes, the color of warm honey, crinkled at the corners with a joy that felt as pure and radiant as the California sun. Our story had started just as simply, just as perfectly. A little over a year ago, in our hometown of Denver, I'd been rushing to a client meeting, juggling my portfolio and a two-full latte. Of course, the inevitable happened. The lid popped, and a wave of scalding coffee cascaded down the front of my white blouse. I let out a frustrated gasp, and that's when I heard his voice, calm and kind. "Whoa, looks like you've got a stage 5 caffeine emergency on your hands." I looked up to see him, Mark, holding a fistful of napkins he'd already grabbed from the counter. He didn't laugh at me, he just helped me blot the stain, his touch gentle, his presence completely disarming. We ended up talking for 3 hours, my client meeting completely forgotten. We discovered a shared love for hiking the trails in the Rockies, for old black and white movies, for the specific, comforting silence of a used bookstore. He was a high school history teacher, passionate and smart, and I was a freelance illustrator, trying to make a name for myself, one commission at a time. The romance was a whirlwind, the kind where you feel you've known the person your entire life. Then there was Brenda, Mark's mother. The first time I met her, I was struck by her polish. Everything about her was expensive and impeccably maintained. From her crisp blonde bob to her manicured nails, to the subtle, clean scent of a perfume that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She was a wealthy widow who'd made a fortune in real estate, and she floated through life with an air of effortless superiority. In the beginning, she seemed wonderful. Overly involved, yes, but she framed it all as loving concern for her only son. It was during the wedding planning that the tiny, precise little cuts began. We'd be discussing catering, and she'd sigh, "Oh, Chloe, dear, it's just, with your family's more authentic tastes, and our friends expecting a certain standard, finding a balance is proving to be a challenge." When I excitedly showed her the simple, elegant dress I'd found at a local boutique, she'd smiled a smile that didn't reach her eyes and said, "It's very sweet. A lovely choice for your budget." But her most frequent target was my career. "It's so wonderful you have a little hobby that pays, dear," she'd said one afternoon while looking over my portfolio, her tone dripping with condescension. "It'll be nice for you to have something to keep you busy while Mark is handling the important things." Each comment was a tiny paper cut, small enough to ignore individually, but together they left me feeling raw and judged. In the midst of all this, right as the wedding frenzy was hitting its peak, my world tilted on its axis. 3 months before I was set to walk down the aisle, my grandmother, Eleanor, passed away. My heart shattered. Grandma Eleanor was my person, my rock. She was the one who'd encouraged my art, who'd told me my little hobby was a gift. She smelled of lavender and old books, and her hands, though wrinkled and spotted with age, were the strongest hands I'd ever known. Her passing left a gaping hole in my life. A week after the funeral, her lawyer called me into his quiet, wood-paneled office. I expected to receive her collection of vintage teacups or her well-loved gardening tools. I was not prepared for what he told me. Grandma Eleanor, a fiercely independent and incredibly shrewd woman who had worked as a nurse her entire life and invested every spare penny, had left everything to me. Specifically, she had left me her 3 condos in a rapidly gentrifying part of downtown Denver. All 3 were completely paid off. No outstanding payments, no liens, just clean titles. I sat there in stunned silence as the lawyer explained the portfolio's estimated worth, a number with so many zeros it felt like monopoly money. It was a life-changing, multi-million-dollar inheritance. My first feeling wasn't joy, but a profound, aching wave of grief. This was the last piece of her, a final, monumental act of love and protection. And as I sat there, the lawyer's words buzzing in my ears, my second thought was, inexplicably, of Brenda. I pictured her polished smile, heard her voice dripping with disdain for my modest background. I imagined telling her and Mark about this, saw the way her eyes would light up, not with happiness for me, but with the cold, calculating glint of an investor sizing up a new asset. A cold knot of dread formed in my stomach. This inheritance felt sacred, a secret between me and my grandmother. The idea of it being absorbed into Brenda's world, of it becoming another topic for her to manage and comment on, felt like a violation. So I made a gut decision, a lightning-fast, instinctual choice fueled by grief and a deep, unsettling suspicion I couldn't yet name. I didn't tell Mark. I told myself it was just temporary. I'll tell him after the wedding, I reasoned, when things have settled down, when we're away from all the pressure and it can be our secret, not a family announcement. It felt right. It felt like I was protecting something, my grandmother's legacy, and maybe, just maybe, myself. Now, returning from a blissful, sun-soaked 2-week honeymoon in Hawaii, that secret felt a million miles away. We stepped over the threshold of our cozy 2-bedroom starter home, a tiny house on a quiet suburban street that we'd scrimped and saved to afford the down payment on. It was filled with our mismatched furniture and our shared dreams. Mark dropped our bags, wrapped his arms around my waist from behind, and buried his face in my hair. "Welcome home, Mrs. Peterson," he whispered, and my heart did a little flip. In that moment, wrapped in his arms in our little house, I was blissfully, idiotically happy. The secret about the condos felt like a distant, unimportant detail, a locked box in the attic of my mind that I'd get to eventually. Our real life was just beginning, and I was sure it was going to be perfect. That post-honeymoon bliss? It has the shelf life of fresh squeezed juice. It's sweet, it's vibrant, and for a few glorious days you think you can live on it forever. But it doesn't last. For Mark and me, that bliss evaporated exactly 3 days after we got back to Denver. We returned from 2 weeks of sun and sand in Hawaii to our cozy little starter home, a 900-square-foot bungalow that felt like our entire world. For those first 72 hours, it was perfect. We unpacked, filling the house with the scent of salty air clinging to our clothes, and the sound of our laughter as we reminisced. And my secret, the 3 condos left to me by my grandmother, felt like a forgotten novel packed at the bottom of a box. Important, yes, but not relevant to the immediate story. I told myself I'd tell him soon, when the time was right. I had no idea how wrong I was about the timeline. The bubble burst with the ring of our doorbell. Standing on our tiny porch was Brenda, Mark's mother, holding a ridiculously large orchid arrangement that looked more expensive than our welcome mat. "Welcome home, darlings," she chirped, breezing past me like I was a coat rack, her expensive perfume instantly overpowering the simple air of our home. She set the orchid on our small dining table, where it looked like a queen visiting a peasant's hut. "Oh, it's so clean." That was the first shot fired. Over the next hour, she conducted a full-scale inspection disguised as a visit. She ran a manicured finger along a windowsill. "You know, these older homes have such character, and drafts." She peered into our spare bedroom, which doubled as my art studio. "This is where you do your little drawings? How sweet. I just can't imagine where you'd put a crib. You two are planning on starting a family soon, aren't you?" Each comment was a tiny, poisoned dart wrapped in a ribbon of concern. I'd smile tightly while Mark, bless his heart, seemed completely oblivious. "Mom's just excited for grandkids," he'd say later, wrapping his arms around me. "Don't take it so seriously." But a week later, it escalated. Brenda invited us to Sunday dinner at their sprawling Cherry Hills mansion. Over a pot roast that probably cost more than our weekly grocery bill, she casually dropped the bomb. "Mark, honey, I was talking to our financial advisor Richard," she said, dabbing her lips with a cloth napkin. "He's a miracle worker. He thinks you two should come in for a chat. It's never too early to plan for your future." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. "Oh, that's okay, Brenda," I said quickly. "We have a budget. We're doing fine." She gave me a patient, condescending smile. Of course, dear. But Richard handles, shall we say, a different level of assets. And he works with the best real estate agent in Denver. You can't possibly plan on starting a family in that starter box. The words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. My little house, the first place that had ever felt truly mine, was a starter box. Mark, eager to please, immediately agreed. That's a great idea, Mom. It can't hurt to just look, right, Chloe? See what's out there? I felt cornered. If I said no, I was the difficult, ungrateful daughter-in-law. If I said yes, I was playing her game. Sure, I mumbled, the food on my plate suddenly tasteless. Why not? That looking turned into a weekend-long parade of horrors. Brenda and her real estate agent, a slick woman named Barb, with teeth so white they looked like a threat, dragged us to million-dollar homes in Washington Park and Hilltop. These houses weren't homes, they were statements. Cavernous living rooms with 20-foot ceilings, kitchens with 3 ovens, and master suites bigger than our entire bungalow. In one ludicrous $2.5 million monstrosity with a wine cellar and a home theater, Barb was gushing about the school district. Brenda turned to me while Mark was gawking at the backyard pool. Her voice was a low, conspiratorial purr. It's a lot to take in, I know, she said, sizing me up. And we all know Mark has the stable career, a real pension. We just have to make sure your variable income doesn't hold him back from a life he deserves. The air went out of my lungs. My variable income. My freelance illustration career, which I was incredibly proud of, and which paid my bills just fine, had been reduced to a potential liability. The shame and anger were so hot, I felt my face flush. And in that instant, my secret about the condos transformed. It was no longer a private detail I was waiting to share. It was a shield. It was a suit of armor I didn't even know I was wearing. The knowledge that I could buy this entire ridiculous house 3 times over with cash was a silent, pulsing power inside me. My income is doing just fine, Brenda, I said, my voice colder than I intended. The drive home was silent and thick with tension. I finally couldn't take it anymore. Mark, are you serious? I asked, my voice trembling slightly. She basically called me a freeloader. She's trying to push us into a life we absolutely cannot afford. A history teacher and a freelance illustrator don't buy a $2 million house. He sighed, his eyes fixed on the road. Chloe, she's just trying to help. She wants the best for us. Can't you see that? You're being too sensitive. Sensitive? I stared at his profile, suddenly feeling like I was sitting next to a stranger. Mark, she's trying to run our marriage. This isn't about what's best for us. It's about what's best for her public image. Can't you see that? She's my mother, he said, his jaw tight. It was the first real crack in our perfect facade. He was defending her, not us. The rest of the drive passed in a painful, wounded silence. The dread didn't go away. It settled in my bones, a constant, low-grade hum of anxiety. I'd be sketching at my desk and find myself staring into space, replaying Brenda's words, seeing her condescending smile. Mark tried to pretend everything was normal, but there was a new distance between us, an invisible wall built of his denial and my growing suspicion. My hand would hover over the folder on my laptop labeled Nai Nai, Mandarin for Grandma, where the digital copies of the deeds were. I'd almost open it, almost decide to just tell him everything, but then the memory of his words, "She's my mother," would stop me. My gut, the same gut that told me to keep quiet in the first place, was now screaming at me to wait. The final straw came 4 days later. I had just gotten back from a walk to clear my head. The house was quiet. I was taking off my shoes in the entryway when I heard Mark's voice from the kitchen, hushed and low. He was on the phone. My heart started to pound. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but I froze, unable to move. He sounded frustrated. "I know, Mom, I know. Just give me a little more time." A pause. I could almost hear Brenda's sharp, insistent voice on the other end. Then Mark said the words that made the blood in my veins turn to ice. "Don't worry, Mom. I'll talk to her. It will all be sorted out by the end of the week. My stomach plummeted. Sorted out. What would be sorted out? My variable income? My resistance to buying a mansion? Me? The casual way he said it, the tone of a son conspiring with his mother against his new wife, it shattered the last remaining piece of my post-honeymoon bliss. He wasn't oblivious, he was a part of it. Suddenly, I wasn't just a nervous newlywed with a difficult mother-in-law. I was a target, and my own husband was helping them aim. It was a Tuesday, exactly 1 week since we'd gotten back from our honeymoon. I remember the clock on the stove blinking 2:14 p.m. The house was quiet, except for the quiet scratching of my stylus against the tablet and the low hum of the refrigerator. I was lost in my work, adding shading to a children's book illustration of a friendly bear, a warm cup of forgotten coffee sitting by my elbow. The air smelled of graphite and that faint, clean scent of our new but still mostly empty starter home. In that moment, the bubble of newlywed bliss, which had been rapidly deflating since Brenda's daily check-ins began, briefly reinflated. It was just me, my art, and the quiet afternoon. It felt peaceful. Then the doorbell rang, a sharp two-tone chime that sliced through the silence and made my shoulders jump. My first thought was that Mark had forgotten his keys, but he wasn't due home from school for hours. I padded to the door in my socks, peering through the peephole. My stomach didn't just drop, it plummeted straight through the floor. It was Brenda, and she wasn't alone. She was standing on our small concrete porch, dressed in a cream-colored pantsuit that probably cost more than our couch. Next to her stood a man I'd never seen before. He was tall, with silver hair and a sterile, impassive face. He wore a dark, impeccably tailored suit and held a sleek leather briefcase at his side. But it wasn't the stranger that made my blood run cold. It was the look on Brenda's face. It was a smirk. Not a smile, not a grin. A tight, triumphant smirk, brimming with a satisfaction that felt predatory. My hand trembled as I unlocked the door. "Brenda," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "I wasn't expecting you." "Chloe, darling," she cooed, sweeping past me into the entryway, her expensive perfume instantly invading my quiet space. "I know, this is a bit impromptu. This is Arthur Vance." She gestured to the man, who gave me a curt nod, his eyes doing a quick, dismissive scan of our living room. "Arthur is a dear friend of the family, and a family law attorney," the man added, his voice as starched as his shirt collar. My heart started to pound, a sick, heavy rhythm against my ribs. A lawyer. Why was there a lawyer in my house? The memory of Mark's hushed phone call flashed in my mind. "Don't worry, Mom, I'll talk to her. It will all be sorted out by the end of the week." This was it. This was the sorting out. "Let's all have a seat, shall we?" Brenda said, already directing the show, gesturing toward our modest sofa as if she owned it. They sat, while I remained standing, feeling cornered in my own home. Arthur Vance placed his briefcase on our coffee table and clicked it open with 2 sharp thunks. The sound echoed in the sudden, tense silence. "Chloe," Brenda began, her voice dripping with a condescending sweetness that turned my stomach. "Mark and I have been talking, and we all agree that, well, you two rushed into things a bit." She gave a little theatrical sigh. "No time for proper planning, no prenup. It's so easy to overlook these little details when you're in love." She looked at Arthur, who took his cue. He slid a thick stack of papers bound in a blue cover across the table towards me. "This," he said, his tone flat and clinical, "is a simple postnuptial agreement." I stared at the document as if it were a venomous snake. "It's just to protect Mark's future," Brenda continued, her voice softening into a purr, "and, by extension, the family's assets. As the main breadwinner with a stable, professional career, it's only sensible that we safeguard what he's building. This just formalizes things." My mind was spinning, connecting every dot with sickening speed. The constant critiques of my freelance career, the push to look at million-dollar houses we couldn't afford, the endless questions about my contribution. It wasn't about wanting the best for us. It was a trap, a carefully laid trap to get me financially entangled, to take control, to ensure that everything I had, or ever would have, would be funneled into their control. Arthur tapped a manicured finger on the top page. "In essence, The agreement pools all current and future assets, both marital and separate, into a single, consolidated trust. For ease of management, he explained, without a flicker of emotion, the trust will be overseen by an impartial, third-party trustee to ensure everything is handled properly and for the benefit of the family unit. Brenda's smirk widened, the final piece of her victory snapping into place. "And I've graciously agreed to be that trustee," she said, her eyes gleaming. "It's all just a formality, darling. For your own good, really. Just sign here and here." That was the moment. The moment the churning fear in my gut didn't curdle into panic, but instead froze into a solid, heavy block of ice-cold resolve. They hadn't just misjudged my finances. They had fundamentally misjudged me. They saw a quiet, artsy girl from a modest background and assumed I was a fool, an easy mark. I looked at Brenda's smug, expectant face, then at the lawyer's impassive one, and I laughed. It wasn't a sound of humor or joy, it was a sharp, brittle noise that cracked the suffocating atmosphere in the room. It was the sound of a trap failing to spring. Brenda's condescending smile faltered. "Is something funny?" "Get out," I said. My voice was low, but it didn't shake. She let out a sputtering gasp. "Excuse me? Chloe, I don't think you understand what's at stake." "Oh, I understand perfectly," I interrupted, my newfound clarity making me feel 10 feet tall. I didn't spare the document another glance. I turned my back on them, walked the 10 feet to my desk, and sat down. My hands moved with absolute certainty as I woke my laptop, opened a web browser, and typed in the address for the Denver County property records. My fingers flew across the keyboard, entering the folio numbers my grandmother's lawyer had made me memorize. 1, 2, 3. I spun the laptop around on the desk, the screen glowing with incontrovertible proof. "You want to talk about assets?" I asked, my voice ringing with a cold power I didn't know I possessed. The screen clearly showed 3 properties, 3 paid-off condos in one of the most desirable, rapidly appreciating neighborhoods in the city. Each one listed me, Chloe Thompson, as the sole owner. "I own these," I said, pointing to the screen. "Outright. No mortgage, no liens. An inheritance from my grandmother, which I received before my marriage and have deliberately kept as separate property. My net worth is, at a conservative estimate, probably 10 times your son's." I stood up and leaned my hands on the desk, looking directly into Brenda's eyes, watching the smugness and condescension finally, completely drain from her face. "Your little plan," I said, each word a perfectly placed stone, "is dead on arrival. Now, for the last time, get out of my house." The smirk was gone. In its place was a mask of pure, unadulterated shock, twisting into a dark and ugly fury. She had come for a shearing and had run headfirst into a fortress wall. The sound of the front door clicking shut was like a gunshot in the sudden ringing silence. For a long moment, I didn't move. I just stood there, my hands still outstretched from pointing at my laptop screen, my whole body vibrating with a strange, high-frequency hum. The living room, which had always felt so cozy and full of promise, now seemed cavernous and cold. The scent of Brenda's expensive, cloying perfume still hung in the air, a phantom of her suffocating presence. My gaze fell to the coffee table, where the post-nuptial agreement lay, its crisp, white pages looking obscene and alien against the warm wood. My knees suddenly felt like they were made of jelly. I sank onto the edge of our worn-out armchair, the one we'd found at a flea market and proudly refinished together. The adrenaline that had turned my fear into an icy weapon began to recede, leaving a brutal, bone-deep ache in its wake. My heart, which had been hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, now felt like a lead weight in my chest. A single, hot tear escaped and slid down my cheek, then another and another, until I was sobbing quietly, my face buried in my hands. It wasn't relief I felt. It was a profound, soul-crushing heartbreak. Brenda's cruelty was one thing. I'd seen glimpses of it for months. But the image I couldn't scrub from my mind was Mark's face as he'd said goodbye that morning, kissing my forehead and promising to pick up Thai food for dinner. The loving, gentle man who held my hand during scary movies and made me laugh so hard my sides hurt. How could that man be part of this? "Don't worry, Mom, I'll talk to her," It will all be sorted out by the end of the week." The words from that overheard phone call echoed in my head, twisting the knife. He knew. He had to have known. The entire honeymoon, our blissful return home, had it all been a performance? A setup for this very moment? The weight of that potential betrayal was heavier than any document, any legal threat. It threatened to pulverize the very foundation of my world. I don't know how long I sat there, lost in a fog of grief and shock, but the sound of a car crunching on the gravel of our driveway jolted me back to the present. His headlights swept across the living room window. My tears instantly dried up, replaced by a surge of white-hot fury. I stood up, my whole body rigid. I snatched the post-nut from the table, the papers crackling in my trembling hand. The jingle of keys at the lock was a sound I usually loved, the sound of my husband coming home. Tonight, it sounded like a precursor to a battle. The door swung open, and there he was. Mark. He was smiling, holding up 2 bags of takeout. "I got the Penang curry you like, and they threw in some extra spring rolls." He stopped mid-sentence. His smile faltered, then vanished completely as he took in the scene. My tear-streaked face, my rigid posture, the furious energy radiating off me. "Chloe? What is it? What's wrong?" he asked, dropping the bags on the small entry table. I didn't answer, I just held up the sheaf of papers. His name was right there on the first page, next to mine. Asterisk, postnuptial agreement between Mark Peterson and Chloe Miller Peterson. Asterisk. For a split second, I saw only confusion in his eyes. Then, without a word, I thrust the document at his chest. The pages fluttered, and he fumbled to catch them. "Your mother paid me a visit," I said, my voice dangerously low and shaking with a rage I could barely contain. "She brought a friend." Mark looked down at the papers in his hands, his brow furrowed as he read the title. "Postnuptial agreement? What is this? I don't understand." He looked up at me, his face a mask of genuine bewilderment. "Chloe, what is going on?" "Don't play dumb with me, Mark," I spat, the words tasting like acid. "This formality, as your mother called it, this little plan to protect our family assets by putting her in charge of everything, including my future earnings. Was this your idea, or did you just go along with it like you always do?" He started flipping through the pages, his eyes scanning the dense legal jargon. I watched his face change, saw the color drain from his cheeks. His jaw went slack. He looked from the page listing Brenda as the impartial trustee, then back to my face, his own eyes wide with a dawning horror that, to my utter confusion, looked completely real. "A lawyer? She brought a lawyer?" he whispered, his voice hoarse. No, that's not. She told me she was bringing over a financial planner, a guy to help us set up a 401k or something, a retirement plan. She said you were worried about freelance income and this would give us peace of mind." He shook his head, looking utterly lost. "Chloe, I swear to you, I had no idea about any of this. I would never." His devastation seemed so authentic it almost knocked me off balance. But the wounds were too fresh, the betrayal too sharp. The only thing I had left was my anger. "And I'm supposed to believe that?" I shot back, my voice rising. "After I hear you on the phone promising your mother you'll have it sorted out by the end of the week? What was it, Mark? What were you sorting out?" He flinched, as if I'd slapped him. But then, as he processed my words, his horrified expression hardened. Something new ignited in his eyes, not just devastation, but a deep, piercing hurt. You kept the condos a secret," he said, his voice barely a whisper. He wasn't looking at the post-nup anymore. He was looking at me, really looking as if for the first time. "My mom was screaming about them on the phone right before I got home. 3 condos in Denver, paid off, an inheritance. The accusation hung in the air between us, thick and heavy. You married me, Chloe," he said, and his voice cracked on my name. "We stood in front of all our friends and family and promised to build a life together, and you were hiding a multi-million-dollar inheritance from me the entire time." He took a step back, the papers falling from his numb fingers to scatter on the floor between us. "You thought I would try to steal from you. Is that what this is? Is that the kind of man you think I am?" His pain was raw, real, and it hit me like a physical blow, but mine was just as searing. What was I supposed to think? I yelled, gesturing wildly at the legal documents on the floor. Your mother has done nothing but criticize me and my little hobby of a job since day one. She's been pushing us to look at houses we can't afford, making comments about my income. And then she shows up with a lawyer and a legal trap designed to give her control over my entire life. My whole body was shaking.
That document proves I was right to be scared. My secret was the only thing that saved me. How could I possibly know who to trust in this family? You're my wife. You were supposed to trust me, he shouted back, his face contorted with anguish. We're a team. Or I thought we were. A team doesn't keep secrets like that. A team talks to each other. A team protects each other, I retorted, tears streaming down my face again. And you have never, not once, protected me from her. You just let her walk all over us and say, she just wants the best for us. The shouting stopped. We just stood there, on opposite sides of the living room, breathing heavily. The cheerful bags of Thai food sat forgotten on the entry table. The documents lay scattered on the floor like shrapnel from an explosion that had just ripped through the heart of our brand new marriage. He looked at me and I looked at him, and in his eyes I saw the same shattered trust that was mirrored in my own. We weren't a team anymore. We were two deeply wounded strangers, standing in the wreckage of what we thought was a perfect love story. I packed a small duffel bag with a zombie-like slowness, moving through the starter home that had felt like a dream just a week ago. Every object seemed to mock me. The wedding photo on the nightstand, where Mark and I were laughing under the Napa sun. The matching coffee mugs we'd bought on our honeymoon. The air was thick with the echoes of our fight. His pained yell of, "You thought I would try to steal from you?" And my own ragged retort, "Your mother just tried to legally entrap me." My trust hadn't just been cracked. It had been pulverized, leaving a fine, gritty dust that coated every surface of my heart. I couldn't stay there. I just couldn't breathe. I drove across Denver to the first of my inherited properties, a corner unit on the 7th floor of a building in Lohi. It had been empty since my grandmother, Eleanor, had passed. I fumbled with the keys, the metal cold against my trembling fingers, and pushed the door open. The air inside was still and smelled faintly of lavender and old books, the ghost of my grandma. Dust motes danced in the shafts of late afternoon light slanting through the big windows. It was nothing but empty rooms, pale walls, and a spectacular floor-to-ceiling view of the city skyline and the distant Rockies. It was a blank canvas. It was a fortress. It was mine. For the first day, I just existed. I ordered pizza, sat on the floor, and stared out at the city lights, feeling utterly hollowed out. The anger and betrayal had given way to a profound, soul-deep sadness. I missed my husband. I missed the man I thought I had married, but I was also terrified of him, or at least of the situation he had allowed to happen. On the second day, driven by a need to do something, anything, I started going through the box of documents Grandma Eleanor had left with her lawyer for me. It contained the deeds to the 3 condos, tax records, and other dry official papers. As I was sorting through a stack of manila folders, a smaller, cream-colored envelope slipped out and fluttered to the polished concrete floor. My name, Chloe, was written on the front in my grandmother's elegant, familiar script. My breath hitched. With unsteady hands, I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of stationery, the letter handwritten. "My dearest Chloe," it began, "if you are reading this, it means I am gone, and these places are now yours. I know you are mourning, my sweet girl, but I also know your strength. I want to leave you with more than just property. I want to leave you with a piece of advice my own mother gave to me. She told me to always, no matter what, have a room of your own, a foundation that is yours and yours alone, not as a fortress to keep love out, but as a platform from which you can always choose love freely, without fear or need. A woman with her own foundation is a woman who can't be pushed, pulled, or manipulated. She partners with someone because she wants to, not because she has to. Your heart is your greatest gift, Chloe. Make sure you only ever give it from a position of strength. This is your strength. Use it wisely.
Tears streamed down my face, blurring the ink. It was as if she was right there in the room with me, wrapping her arms around me. A room of your own. A foundation. She understood. She knew. This secret I had kept, this inheritance, wasn't a betrayal. It was the very foundation she was talking about. It had saved me. It had given me the power to say, "Get out." And now it had given me this quiet, empty space to heal and think. The next evening, the buzzer for the condo's front lobby rang, startling me. My heart hammered against my ribs. I looked at the security screen, and there was Mark, standing on the sidewalk, looking small and lost. I hesitated for a long moment, my hand hovering over the button. Then I buzzed him in. He looked terrible when he knocked on my apartment door. His eyes were red-rimmed and shadowed, and he was holding two things: a file folder and a brochure for a marriage counseling center. He didn't try to hug me or even step inside until I moved back to let him. "Chloe," he started, his voice cracking, "I am so sorry." I just crossed my arms, waiting. I had heard apologies. I needed more. "I went to see my mother," he said, his voice gaining a hard edge I had never heard before. "I told her what she did was unforgivable. I told her that she had tried to destroy our marriage, to humiliate you, and that she had betrayed my trust in her completely. I told her that until she could see you as my wife, my partner, and my equal, she was no longer welcome in our lives. I cut her off, Chloe, completely." I felt a flicker of something inside me. It was the first step.
"I know that's not enough," he rushed on, as if reading my mind. He opened the file folder. "I went to see a lawyer, my own lawyer. This," he said, handing me a document, "is a notarized postnuptial statement. It legally and irrevocably acknowledges the condos and any income from them as your sole and separate property forever. It says I have no claim, now or ever, no matter what happens." I took the paper, my eyes scanning the dense legal text. It was real. He had actually done it. "I don't want your money, Chloe," he said, his eyes pleading with mine. "I never did. I fell in love with you in a coffee shop because you had paint on your cheek and you laughed at my dumb history jokes. That's all I've ever wanted. I messed up. I was weak, and I let my mom walk all over me and all over us. I let her make me blind. But my eyes are open now, and my heart is absolutely broken that I hurt you like this, and that you ever felt for 1 second that you couldn't trust me." He held up the brochure. "I've already booked our first appointment. If you'll go. I know I broke our trust, but I will spend the rest of my life rebuilding it, brick by brick, if you'll let me." I looked from his anguished face to the legal document in my hand, then to the letter from my grandmother sitting on the counter. "Choose love freely, without fear or need." For the first time in a week, I didn't feel fear. I had a foundation under my feet. Mark wasn't making excuses, he was making amends. He wasn't just talking, he was taking action. He was choosing me. "Okay, Mark," I whispered, the word feeling fragile in the quiet room. "Okay, we can try." A wave of relief washed over his face so powerful it almost brought him to his knees. He didn't rush to me but just stood there, letting the moment settle. Later, we stood together on the balcony, not touching, just looking out at the vast, glittering expanse of the Denver skyline. It wasn't a perfect fairy tale ending. The hurt was still there, a tender bruise on our new marriage. But for the first time, it felt like we were looking at the future from the same place, ready to start building a real partnership, an honest one from a foundation of truth.